And keep time again.
Ooh, hello. Okay, so our discussion this week has two parts. So, um, let's see. The first, um, the first part is what is important to understand in regards to client cultural factors when exploring treatment options with clients relative to their substance use concerns, and why is this important to understand?
So I'm guessing this is related to chapter 11.
Right. Right. Yeah. I was trying to copy and paste the question into the chat, um, so that we could just have that as a prompt.
I mean, I don't know why culture is never ever not a particular consideration, but I wonder if the angle on this question, and I'd be curious what you all think, is that some cultures have embedded in it some level of substance use. And so for certain cultures, to use minor amount, well, does it say substance abuse? No, substance use. Yeah. To use minor amounts of substances might be part of ritual, might be part of, a historical practice. And so in my mind, some of the distinction is between substance use and substance abuse, and in terms of where and when we might start to intervene. That's just first reaction. And that cultural factors is like a really strong indicator as to kind of if something is a, potentially problematic for the client. Does any of that resonate? What do you all think?
Yeah, it does resonate.
Yeah.
And on page 305 of chapter 11, in the book, uh, it talks about being sensitive to sociocultural factors.
Yep.
And I liked the question that they asked, an example question of sort of delving into a client's held cultural perspectives on substance use would be like, how is your problem with heroin understood within your community?
Mm-hmm.
And you could substitute that with any substance, but then it says, and the author says, when using the word community, I add descriptors such as family, clan, tribe, family, or family of choice, etc., friends,
Mm-hmm.
spiritual, and/or religious community, and within whatever networks of an interpersonal nature where the client spends her or his time. I feel like, yeah, like that is helpful because it sort of um, takes into account a subjective understanding of substance use within a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking also about just how, yes, substance use is something that can also be like really social and something that like brings people together, and imagining just like yeah, clients who are coming from cultures in which it is like very much like a part of like the way that they are interacting with family, the way that like they're interacting with friends, and just like how to just address substance use concerns and be like, okay, you have to go fully sober right now, as opposed to like a harm reduction model or something else that um, might work with them where they're at. That can
Mm-hmm.
also like really like pull them from community. Then also I'm thinking on another side, like I had a client who um, addiction is like really rampant in their family, and they um, a lot of their family was like in recovery together, and they all had like different approaches to recovery, and that's just like another thing that's coming up for me here is thinking about that and thinking about like the support that could be found in like in their culture and their like community, especially if like addiction is something that's like commonly occurring.
Totally
Yeah.
agree on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Aspen, and
Yeah, good.
oh, sorry. Yeah, when you're talking about support within a community, I'm also thinking about if I guess if abstinence-based programs are of interest to a client, seeking out culturally specific abstinence-based programs like, you know, culturally specific NA meetings or AA or whatever that is, because they're just a ton. There's such a multitude of different flavors of those meetings or support groups or whatever is there.
Mm-hmm.
When you were chatting, Aspen, it was also making me think, I love your point about the supportive, but how sometimes someone's cultural, depending on how we define culture, their community or the norms which they're used to could make it really hard for them to get better, kind of what you were initially intimating. And that part of our job is to then maybe understand that and potentially help create interventions that allow them to not lose connectedness, for example, while trying to kind of abstain or you know, reduce their intake of certain substances, and how that can potentially go on potentially be overlooked if it then it put it on the burden of the client to figure out how to like navigate that on their own. So I love the kind of like what you said about anticipating that, or just thinking about that.
Yeah.
I think it'll be.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I tend to think of substance use and abuse as you know, a coping strategy for a number of different suffering parts of a person. And I I think that just within like a specific cultural lens could be helpful in understanding what it is from that person's background, how, you know, what it is that and words are failing me right now, but I think that, you know, it's like for example, like if someone comes from a particular religious background and they've been marginalized and they're using substances as a coping strategy for their whatever they've gone through, their marginalization, understanding their background and their cultural context kind of sheds light on why they're using, you know. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'm so glad you stuck with it, because it totally makes sense. It totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, time check. We
Oh,
are about 4.5 minutes from the 13-minute mark, so we might want to start moving in to the other.
Sure, yeah. So in this second section, we had a case study, and there are some questions that go along with this case study. So I just posted those.
In terms of diagnosis, we had been talking a little bit before recording about generalized anxiety as like a pretty clear starting point. I'd also been wondering about sleep disorders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a particular sleep disorder in mind, but they did just like talk about her that she can fall asleep without a problem, but wakes up in the middle of the night and can't fall asleep again.
This sleep, so John and I haven't taken psychopathology, so I don't have as good of an understanding of the DSM. So I'm going to ask you two: do sleep disorders, do those show up in the DSM, or is that something separate? Oh yeah, oh interesting.
Yeah.
And
I also imagine that's something where we could get support from doctors, like you're like working with a care team, because there's, yeah, they could definitely get like a sleep study done or do more than we're able to do, or than what's in our scope of practice.
Yeah, and sleep is so big, it's like if this client is having issues staying asleep throughout the night, that can affect their mood, it can affect so much throughout their day. And if this has been going on for quite a while, that could be an explanation for what they're experiencing.
Mhm.
I was thinking of generalized anxiety disorder. From what they just all of the symptoms that they had listed in the case study, that's where my mind went. And I know that oftentimes, like major depressive disorder, those symptoms can be similar, but I think that the difference there is that the client reports that their mood is okay, and there isn't sort of like a loss of enjoyment. They don't satisfy a lot of the major depressive disorder features, the symptoms. So,
And just because it's listed as number 2, the current symptoms, I think the key ones that stick out to me, Aspen already mentioned the sleep, inconsistency or waking up, or maybe that was Aaron or both of you. And then there's also nervousness, muscle tension, restlessness, insomnia is how they frame it, and just general worrying.
Yeah, and that it's increased over the past 7 months.
Right after her kid was born, right?
mm-hmm.
Oh, which reminds me of that postpartum article. And the role that pregnancy can play on some people's biochemistry, which would then impact the medication potentially. How are we doing on time?
We're running a little bit low, so let's move through the rest of the questions. We have about 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Are you
2.5
satisfied with
minutes.
client
Sure.
symptoms? Did we nail that?
Yeah.
Okay. So what medications in your minds, or side effects do you want to articulate?
I was thinking just SSRIs as like a first option. So it has, all kinds of side effects, including like the sexual side effects, the just like headaches, lethargy, like all kinds of things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also thought of an SSRI as well, but also if you're thinking about sleep disorder, maybe a hypnotic, a sedative agent.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on medication side effects? Should we move on to precautions while taking this medication? I guess with SSRIs, I'm thinking about how hard it is to taper off of them. And that would be a good thing for her to know. Also, just, I think a lot of people don't know that and will just jump off of them very quickly, which can produce a lot more side effects.
Yeah, I also think like startup syndrome as well. Like if, just monitoring whatever kind of side effects she's having from an SSRI at the beginning would be important to monitor.
I think it would be important to check if she's breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Because pregnant and or nursing mothers, I think there should be just caution if they're on an SSRI because of the impact it could have on small children.
Sure, yeah.
I think we are about at our time limit, so maybe we should stop the recording and end there.
Sounds good.